Thank you for watching The Thought Criminals, named after the resistance to the totalitarian thought police of George Orwell's 1984, which we now refer to as being woke. I'm your host, Rachel Alexander. I'm a weekly contributor to Townhall and other sites and the editor of Intellectual Conservative. And this is my mall, Ralph Benko. He is recovering from a mild case of COVID, so disregard the coughing. He has worked in or with the Reagan, W. Bush, and Trump White Houses. He's a weekly columnist for Newsmax, co-author of the Capitalist Manifesto, and co-founder and executive chairman of the 186,000 member Capitalist League Facebook group. And I want to remind everybody, you can find us on thoughtcriminals.ning.com. That's where we want everybody to go and subscribe. Today, we are going to focus the entire show to gun control, in particular, this new spate of red flag laws that has been popping up around the country. There are around half the states which have implemented them. And here in Arizona, we have been fighting off an effort by our Rhino Governor Doug Ducey to implement them. He basically said after the latest school shooting in Texas, his spokesperson said that, yes, they are looking at red flag laws. And while Republicans control the Arizona legislature, they only control them by one vote in each chamber, and both of those votes are rhinos. So it is a little bit of a fear that it could happen. And I just want to go over some of the reasons why red flag laws, while they might sound good in theory, let's keep people with bad mental health problems from owning guns, that's not how they're going to play out. And they haven't been thought through very well and implemented very well. For example, when Ducey wanted to put in his red flag laws, which is called STOP legislation, STOP orders, which stands for Severe Threat Order of Protection, he didn't have many safeguards that you could put in there to preserve the Second Amendment, preserve due process. Basically, somebody could go to a judge and complain and say, hey, my neighbor is crazy, and so he is a threat, and I think that he should have his guns taken away. And based just on that, one of these types of people, there's a list of people who could do this: school administrators, social workers, mental health professionals, teachers. All these people could go just on their word and have a judge listen to them. And the gun owner never gets a trial. He never gets due process. He's never found criminally guilty of anything. This is where it gets scary. And so here in the Arizona legislature a couple years ago, some conservative legislators tried to amend Ducey's bill and do things like provide for a hearing before their guns would be taken away. But there were still some other, problems with it. And although it passed one chamber, which is surprising, all the Republicans voted for it, it did not pass the other chamber. Now, part of the reason it did pass is because the NRA backed it. And you can get into a real big controversy there, whether the NRA should be conceding on some of these things. I believe the NRA's approach is, we got to be practical. If we don't allow some concessions, they're going to go all out and, do things like ban assault weapons. So I understand the reasoning, but from the Second Amendment experts I've talked to, and I used to be in the gun industry myself as the editor of a Western shooting journal a few years ago for 2 years, it seems like we're encroaching on, a slippery slope here. And I don't think we'd be going down the right path to agree to these arbitrary things where, my ex-husband could come and get my guns taken away. And he actually did something very similar to me when we split up. He took my gun and he gave it to Phoenix police. And when I tried to get it back from them, they said they had, no record of it. They had no way to trace it. So, this is a very real threat that somebody like that could use it arbitrarily against somebody who had never done anything wrong. My ex-husband didn't even tell them anything, like say any complaints about me. He was just trying to be malicious. So, where do you come down, Ralph, on this whole red flag gun laws issue? I think you need to unmute, Ralph. I don't think COVID's taken away your voice that bad.
Darn right. Oh, you got me. Look, Rach, as you know, because we've co-authored articles about this, 2 of them so far, and more to come. And that is, I believe that the fundamental breakdown in gun violence can be cured by honoring the full Second Amendment, not half the Second Amendment. And I'm passionate about it. Right now, we've got very, very strong protections, which is great. I'm all for it. I mean, I'm really for it. The right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's an important right, but it's only half a right. The other half is a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security, note that word, security of a free state. The right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We, the NRA, and the other professional gun lobbyists and gun advocates, the NRA makes, last time I looked, which was today, almost $500 million a year off of its gig, okay? And somehow they've managed to completely drop the ball on our constitutional right to a well-regulated militia, meaning an organized body that that is trained and drilled and is part of an organized body that reports to the governor, that make sure that people are not only have guns, the state will give them the guns, it will give them the ammo, it will train them, all for that, okay? But that it is well regulated. Now, why is this important? Because Switzerland has this system. Switzerland has a perfect Second Amendment system. Every male from the age of 18 to the age of 50, last time I looked, is a member of the Swiss Army. I assume they turn 18, they give them one of those cute little Swiss Army knives and stuff like that. And they go to boot camp and they drill for 2 weeks every summer, and they have to maintain the high level of discipline that is required by every responsible gun owner. Well, guess what? Switzerland is armed to the teeth as much as the United States, as much as Texas. Switzerland is one of the most heavily armed countries in the world. And their rate of gun violence is only 1/10 of ours. Plus, I haven't looked it up, but I'm guessing that the rate of mass shootings is approximately 0. So the fact is if we were to be demanding, you and I, were to be demanding the full Second Amendment rights rather than half of our Second Amendment rights, I believe that the whole problem of having unhinged people running around shooting up schools and grocery stores and whatever would resolve itself without having to get into the whole red flag issue.
Okay, well, can you explain to our millions of viewers what would be the difference between this versus the National Guard? Because, for example, here in Arizona, Doug Ducey could have called up the National Guard and declared an invasion on the Arizona border, but he never has. So they're just sitting there unutilized, only for a very small purpose on the border. He's only, put a handful of them down there.
Yeah, I can't speak about Doug Ducey's motivations, but you've changed the subject, Rachel, and I don't want to get into with this show the question as to whether Doug Ducey should be mobilizing the National Guard to defend the border. Maybe he should. It's a very intriguing idea, but I haven't studied it, so I'm not in a position to talk about it intelligently.
Well, I just want to know, how is a well-regulated militia, as you envision, different from a National Guard?
Okay, the National Guard, in the beginning, all 57 states of the United States, don't hold me to that number, I'm getting it from Obama, had its own standing army called the state militia. Okay, and I'm teasing here a little bit. Initially, there were 13 states and 13 state militias. And then every time we let in another state, it would bring its militia with it. Then sometime after the Civil War, the state militias were, most of the state militias were subsumed into the United States National Guard, which is sort of a conglomeration of militias. And the state and the National Guard, problematically, but we can fix this, reports both to the governor and to the president. Now, the purpose of the Second Amendment, and it's absolutely crystal clear to the point where the Washington Post, which hates it, has to admit that it's true. It was to maintain the Second Amendment, a well-regulated state militia, being necessary to the security of a state, people's right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, was to protect us from a tyrannical federal government, not from a bunch of immigrants. I'm all for sport shooters, I'm all for hunters' rights, I'm all for home defense rights, but none of that is the reason the founding fathers created the Second Amendment.
Well, you're mischaracterizing that argument anyway. I'm not talking about immigrants. I'm talking about crime on the border, drug cartels, human trafficking. I mean, I that's fine if you want to, turn the other way at misdemeanor.
No.
Migrants.
I'm just telling you, you're changing the subject. It's an interesting and worthy change, but I'm not equipped to discuss it. I am equipped to discuss, since I am a constitutional lawyer as well as a lawyer, and as I've read the founding documents and I've read the scholarship, it is unequivocally clear that the state militias were there initially to protect us from foreign invasions, particularly the British, right? So I'm not saying that that's if we're having some kind of foreign invasion, whether it's military or whether it's breakdown of law and order. I would love you to go out and research and find out whether that's appropriate use.
I'm just worried that you're going to have governors like in the big gun control states like New York and California who would not utilize these well-regulated militias. So even if we were to get every state to say, hey, this is our state militia, it might be different from the National Guard, but will they even do anything if you got some left-wing governor who's in charge of them?
Well, you know what? That's on them. If they don't want to use this constitutional right, if they don't want to maintain the security of a free state, if they want to let it break down and their citizens want to let it break down, that's on them. All I'm saying is we know from the Swiss example that a well-regulated militia, like the Swiss Army or like the state militias or like the state National Guards, is a great way of reducing gun violence by an order of magnitude. So rather than—
And you don't think that that's just because the Swiss are more isolated than us in our location with our porous borders? I always felt that was the reason why we have more gun crime than Europe, because it's much easier for people to come over our southern border.
No. That's not the cause of that's not the cause of the gun crime. But you're changing the subject again. I don't understand it. What we want to reduce illegitimate gun violence. You do and I do, right? Can we agree on that? We don't want people shooting up elementary schools. Neither you nor I do, okay? And I believe that the most potent and constitutionally legitimate way to prevent that is to reinstate the well-regulated militia that the Constitution guarantees us, and which has, and don't cut me off because I got something else to say. Constitution guarantees us, and that the NRA and the other establishment gun rights, supposedly gun rights groups, have completely fumbled the ball on making sure that we have our full Second Amendment rights. Rather than
to look into why they're ignoring this.
I don't care why. I'm a Second Amendment absolutist. I want the whole enchilada. I think you and I should set up our own citizens committee for the right to a well-regulated militia, and we should demand it and insist on it, not worry why big gun is abdicating its obligation, abdicating its duty, abdicating its responsibility to fight.
I like that. I've never heard that one. Did you just make that up?
I just made that up. Okay, but let me shift here because you've implicitly raised another question, and it's a good question, and that is, there's an argument going on by some very smart people about whether it's not enough just to send thoughts and prayers and to do nothing. Okay, letting the system go in place and letting nuts shoot up schools is unacceptable. So some of my friends or acquaintances or tribe members anyway are saying, don't lock up the guns, lock up the nuts. And what they're arguing for, and it's an interesting case, but it's got a flaw in it, is a red flag law that gets people, that gets the government to lock up the dangerous lunatics, not lock guns away from people who might or might not be dangerous lunatics. So since I have to have a little coughing fit here, Rachel, would you please?
Have a fit, because I want to make a comment about that. The ACLU and liberals in the 1960s were what put these people back out on the streets. We used to put these people in mental institutions, and then they all came by and said, oh, that's infringing on their rights, blah, blah, blah.
No. I was there, you're too young. Okay, they were saying, these are incredibly horrible, gruesome places that are a disgrace, and they were. Willowbrook School in Albany, in the Mid-Hudson Valley of New York, where I was from, when U.S. Senator Bobby Kennedy went to visit it, they had inmates killing each other with impunity because the state had not appropriated enough money to make it a decent care facility with enough people there. And so it was a horror house. And you can look this up. Willowbrook is what triggered the
I'm sure money wasn't the only issue. We know how this stuff goes, but yeah.
Well, the thing is, the psychotics don't have a lot of votes, and they don't have a lot of sympathy. But I'm just saying that
they're one step above pedophiles.
Well, I don't want to equate the two. One is a moral horror, and the other is a psychosis. And so I don't. That's neither here nor there, Rachel. I'm just saying that you're half right. Okay, the civil justice, the social justice warriors of the day, including the ACLU and including the state of Bobby Kennedy and including others, this is intolerable. We can't keep them locked up, and there isn't enough political will to create campuses for them where they can live decently as opposed to living a horrible life. So we are going to put all the nuts out on the streets. And by the way, for not all of them, but for many of them, when you see street people, okay, these are people with psychological problems who would have been institutionalized pre-Willowbrook. And so there are a lot of social morbidities that have come out from taking these people out of their horror houses and putting them free to roam the streets. So that raises some very interesting moral dilemmas. If, like me, you say, if we lock them back up in these horror houses, then yes, we'll be safer. Yes, they won't be shooting up schools. No, they won't be harassing us on the streets. But what they do to each other in there unprotected is intolerable. So unless we get it right, and there's no sign that we will, then we're stuck in a moral dilemma. That said, the people who are saying the red flag laws should be, look, I had a friend many, many years ago, maybe even before you were born, who had a wife. And I knew him back from a political campaign in New York. And then we both came to Washington. We kind of lost track. And he developed a psychosis, and he ended up institutionalized, because you can institutionalize people. It's just very hard, and you can keep them institutionalized against their will. It's just you have to prove that they're an imminent threat to themselves or others. But his wife was also psychotic, and she was this close at all times from committing suicide. And when she objected to being institutionalized, it was too hard. There was no way we could tell. The psychiatrist would go, "I'm sorry, if she says no, I can't make the case." So I just want you to acknowledge, to recognize, this is a morally hard case. It doesn't justify our taking the guns away from innocent people.
Well, and I will tell you, two of my very good friends on the Second Amendment issue, two of the top guys on this issue, disagree over whether we should implement mental health background checks when you do a background check to buy a gun. So this has really divided the gun community, with some saying, hey, look, we're going to have to, cave in and take some steps, and other more absolutists saying, heck no, this could be arbitrarily interpreted. There could be false positives. This is not good. My gut instinct is I don't like that anyway. Here in Arizona, you don't even have to get a background check if you buy a gun from a private party. So there's that aspect. And one other thing I wanted to make sure we hit on, one of the solutions that that is being recommended here in Arizona by Charles Heller, who is the communications director for the Arizona Citizens Defense League. He believes the way to handle situations like the Texas school shooting is these things called FASTER. FASTER stands for Faculty and Administrator Safety Training and Emergency Response. And it basically allows faculty and other school staff to take the right training they need to be able to carry a firearm and handle one of these mass shooting incidents. Because the one thing that I learned from Charles is most of these people who die in these mass shootings, they die because they bleed out. They don't actually die because of the bullet. So if you can get them to a hospital within an hour, if you can stop the bleeding and get them to an hour to a hospital, 90% of them, if they're breathing when they're at the hospital, they will live.
Well, Rachel, thank you for making my point, my original point, better than I ever could have. If we had a well-regulated militia and all adults from age 18 to age 50, 60, 65, you name it, okay, were to be trained on these exact skills, all of them, not just school teachers, school administrators would be naturally part of this. And we would not be limiting our protection just to schools, but also to grocery stores, to movie theaters, to everywhere. And so personally, and by the way, I've talked to quite a number of very ferociously proud gun rights advocates. And you know what? They love this idea. So it's not like we're going to we're not trying to walk over or sneak one past gun owners. No, we're trying to serve the gun owners, okay, by making them better.
I love the fact that you just pointed out incorporating these two, because these mass shooters aren't just happening at schools; they're happening everywhere. Right. And I got to tell our viewers this, which I think is just awesome. Guess which school district in Arizona currently already has this? Tombstone. They have signs that are posted around the school saying, be careful because our staff does carry weapons. And there's school districts around the country, including in Colorado and Ohio and Texas, that have implemented this. And it's officially part of some of the government, like the government in Ohio pays for this training. Now, the organization here in Arizona, the gun rights organization, they would actually provide free training. So if our schools here in Arizona wanted to implement it, it wouldn't even cost taxpayers a dime.
So look, Rachel, once again, we're fighting. We're up on the commanding heights together, fighting the Kinos, conservatives in name only, rhinos, Republicans in name only, or rhinoceroses. I've never been really quite clear of that. Okay, what we need is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and the gun violence will plummet.
Well, let's just tell our viewers to stay tuned, because you and I are going to be working some more on getting that rolling. And thanks for watching us. God bless, and see you next week.